You won't believe how a single Sunday service quietly turned into one of the most talked about church controversies people were still debating weeks later. What began as an ordinary worship gathering slowly shifted into something far more complicated, far more uncomfortable, and far more revealing than anyone expected. At first, nothing seemed out of place. The music played, worship continued, smiles stayed fixed on faces. But almost immediately, something subtle changed in the room, the kind of shift you can feel before you can explain it. Heads began to turn, eyes followed movement. Whispers started traveling from one row to the next like a ripple no one could stop. From under the stage lights, the pastor's wife had walked into the sanctuary, wearing a dress that caught everyone off guard. From a distance, the lighting created an illusion that confused people. Some thought the look was bold, others believed it crossed a line. But what mattered most was not fashion. It was shock. This was not just any woman. This was the pastor's wife, someone many believed should visually represent the values preached every single week from that pulpit. Phones stayed down at first, but tension rose quickly. People weren't sure what they were seeing or how to process it. And that's how a normal Sunday quietly became something else entirely. Because what followed was never really about clothes. Here's where the story takes a sharp turn. The church had no written rule against what she wore. In fact, leadership had often spoken openly about freedom, self-expression, and rejecting judgment toward women's bodies. That contradiction hung heavy in the room. Some members remembered sermons about grace and acceptance. Others recalled teachings about modesty, order, and image. In that moment, both ideas collided in real time, and no one knew which one mattered more. As the service continued, the mood grew uneasy. Witnesses later said the pastor's tone changed. His words came faster. His energy tightened, like someone trying to hold something together before it slipped completely. What should have felt like worship instead felt like quiet, damage control. Attendance that day was higher than usual, which only amplified everything. More people meant more opinions, more reactions, and more eyes catching every detail. What makes this story different is that it didn't explode immediately. It simmered. When the service ended, the tension followed everyone into the hallways. Conversations sharpened. Some members defended the pastor's wife, saying critics were being judgmental. Others argued a boundary had been crossed in a sacred space. Longtime members openly questioned leadership. Volunteers debated each other in corners. And standing at the center of it all was the woman everyone was talking about. At first, she appeared calm, even confident. But that confidence didn't last. As reactions grew louder and more personal, witnesses said her expression changed. Calm faded into frustration. She tried to move through the crowd, but the weight of the moment followed her. The craziest part was this. While the internet hadn't even noticed yet, the emotional pressure inside the building was already boiling over. Destiny took an unexpected turn the moment the doors closed behind her and public eyes were gone. Behind restricted areas of the church, away from the congregation, emotions reportedly broke free. According to people who later spoke out, voices were raised. Words came out that had been held in for years. And this is where the dress stopped being the real issue. What unfolded was something much deeper. The pastor's wife allegedly felt blindsided, not only by the congregation's reaction, but by the silence of those closest to her. Leadership reportedly advised her to stay quiet and let the situation pass. To some, that sounded like wisdom. To her, it felt like abandonment. That silence changed everything. According to multiple accounts, she accused leadership of using her as a shield, allowing attention to stay on her appearance while deeper issues inside the ministry went unaddressed. She allegedly claimed the same people judging her had looked away from serious problems for years. Some insiders later said she spoke about long-standing marital tension. Others said she hinted at feeling controlled in public but unheard in private. The message was clear to those who heard it. This was never really about a dress. Only a handful of people were present for those moments. Staff members, volunteers, family. People never meant to repeat what was said, but stories have a way of escaping when emotions spill over. Soon, quiet hints began appearing online. Short comments, vague posts, statements suggesting there was far more beneath the surface. And once people sensed a cover-up, curiosity turned into digging. As those hints spread, the story slipped out of the church walls and into the public eye. And you won't believe how fast the narrative changed when social media got involved. What started as whispers became private messages. Those messages turned into leaked clips and blurry photos. By the end of the day, people who had never stepped inside the church were arguing online about what they thought had happened. Here's the shocking part: most of them didn't know the full story. They were reacting to fragments, not facts. And once the internet senses confusion, it never waits for clarity. Captions became louder than truth. Some framed the pastor's wife as rebellious. Others framed her as a victim of unfair standards. Meanwhile, leadership remained silent, and that silence created space for assumptions to grow. The dress became a symbol rather than a garment. To some, it represented disrespect. To others, it exposed hypocrisy that had existed long before that Sunday. As reactions intensified, former church members began watching closely. At first, they stayed quiet. Then something shifted. Patterns started becoming clear. Old sermons resurfaced. Archived live streams were reposted. Messages about grace, submission, and image were suddenly viewed through a different lens. Moments that once felt normal now felt uncomfortable in hindsight. Former volunteers began comparing timelines. They remembered meetings where questions were discouraged. They recalled people who quietly disappeared from leadership without explanation. This story wasn't built on one accusation. It was built on many small experiences finally connecting. Each person had only seen a piece. Now those pieces were lining up. Attention shifted back to the pastor's household. On stage, the marriage had appeared strong and united, but insiders claimed tension had existed for a long time. Some remembered awkward moments during services. Others recalled long absences explained as rest or spiritual renewal. At the time, no one questioned it. Now those explanations felt incomplete. Leadership responded the same way former members said it always had: emphasize unity, warn against gossip, encourage trust in authority. But this time, it didn't work. Too many people had already seen too much. Too many stories sounded the same. Silence stopped protecting the situation and started exposing it. Online comments appeared under viral posts. "Y'all don't even know the half. This goes deeper than clothes." Those words fueled speculation even without names or proof. Leadership shared careful statements about love and grace, but gave no direct answers. To supporters, it sounded wise. To critics, it felt like avoidance. Days passed, the focus shifted again. People stopped asking whether the dress was appropriate. They started asking whether the church culture allowed honesty at all. Attendance reportedly dropped. Familiar faces stopped showing up. Volunteers stepped back quietly. Something had cracked. Behind closed doors, meetings were reportedly held to manage the fallout. The goal was stability, but tension filled the room. Public unity masked private strain. The more leadership tried to control the narrative, the more people questioned what they were protecting. By this point, the controversy wasn't fading, it was evolving. Shock turned into concern. Gossip turned into questions that refused to go away. A marriage sat under a microscope. A church struggled to hold on to credibility, and everyone sensed the same thing. What had come out wasn't the whole story. As weeks passed, curiosity turned into investigation. People dug through old posts, deleted captions, archived videos, screenshots. These weren't loud accusations. They were quiet details painting a heavier picture. Focus shifted from a moment to a pattern. Former members replayed sermons that once sounded encouraging but now felt controlling. Messages about submission played beside messages about freedom. The contrast made people uncomfortable. Nothing was new, only the context had changed. A recurring theme emerged. According to insiders, the pastor's wife had carried expectations long before that Sunday. She was expected to be visible but not vocal, polished but not powerful, present but never disruptive. Her emotional crash didn't come out of nowhere. It looked like pressure that had been building quietly for years. Old posts resurfaced where she spoke about feeling misunderstood and boxed into roles she never chose. At the time, those words were praised. Now they felt like warnings that had been ignored. Behind the scenes, insiders claimed tension inside the home grew heavier. Public smiles covered private distance. Decisions were made without open conversation. Isolation deepened. Then came the most damaging claims. During her private breakdown, insiders alleged she hinted at family matters intentionally kept quiet to protect the church's image. No details were confirmed. No evidence released. But the suggestion alone shook trust. Once people believe something is hidden, imagination fills the gaps. Online discussions turned serious. Questions grew uncomfortable. Where does privacy end when leadership affects a congregation? What happens when personal pain spills into public responsibility? Leadership still didn't answer directly. Silence, time, and quiet removal were familiar tactics, former members said. But now they fueled suspicion. Attendance continued to drop. Defenders grew louder. Critics multiplied. The divide widened. This was no longer about blame. It was about trust. People questioned whether they'd been shown truth or performance for years. And at the center of it all stood a marriage far more fragile than anyone had been led to believe. In the end, the pastor's wife didn't just wear something controversial. She unintentionally exposed a system under pressure. A family expected to perform holiness while unraveling privately. A church preaching freedom while enforcing control. That's why this story refused to disappear, not because of fashion, but because people recognized the pattern. Long after headlines faded, conversations continued. People stopped asking what she wore. They started asking why honesty felt dangerous in a place built on truth. There was no clean ending, no public apology, no clear resolution. Just silence, speculation, and a community permanently changed by one moment that revealed far more than anyone was prepared to see. And once trust is shaken, it doesn't quietly return.